Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udegang. It's the show where we chat with business analysts and project managers about their challenges and triumphs, their ideas, and their contribution to their field. It's inspiring, it's upbeat, it's exciting, but most of all, it's inquisitive. My guest today wears many hats. He is first and foremost a project manager and performance coach, but also a board member and mentor for the PMI UK chapter, that is the Project Management Institute's UK chapter, and he is a club officer for Toastmasters UK and Ireland chapter. Please help me welcome to today's show, Nigel Smith. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you, Marcus. Great to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So Nigel's story is a varied and intriguing one because he exemplifies that, while quintessential combination of how Toastmasters and project management nicely blend together. So let's start out by asking, well, the inquisitive question, Nigel. How and why did you select project management as a career?
That's a really great question, Marcus. And I think the answer is it probably chose me. I started my career in my formative years working in the automotive industry, actually as an engineer, which is a very structured and analytical discipline. And I found that it was all about getting stuff done in a planning technique. And so it was a very easy way to move into project management. In fact, I would say I became an accidental project manager, like most of us do, not realizing that you're doing it, and then you are doing it, of course, and then thinking, am I good enough to do all of this? I think it would be called possibly imposter syndrome today, but certainly when I started my career, that was not an available condition as such. But I did start out that way. I think it actually found me, but I did like the structure, the routine, getting outputs, getting resources and putting plans together to achieve stuff. So I think it met my sort of inner sort of planner in that regard.
Fantastic. Now, how did you join Toastmasters? Like, how long have you been involved with it?
Well, it's a really strange story as well, Marcus, because I became aware of Toastmasters back in 2007. And the reason it was 2007 is that's when I joined the PMI UK chapter and qualified as a PMP. Now, of course, in all the literature that the UK chapter sent out, there's always a section on Toastmasters. And I always thought, I don't need this, I'm good enough. And actually Toastmasters, it sounds a bit old fashioned, it sounds a bit stuffy, you know, a chap in a tricorn hat with the red coat ringing a bell, shouting, oh yay. I got this real fuddled up sort of image in my mind about what it was really all about. And I felt I was good enough. But fundamentally, when I recognized later in my career that I needed to adopt and develop a more or a much better or improved soft skill set, Toastmasters was the first place I went to. And once I got there, I realized how average I actually was. And the things I've learned over the last 2.5 years, which is how long I've been a member, Marcus, have been utterly transformational. And sometimes it's small things that you learn from Toastmasters that make the biggest difference in terms of, you know, body language, presence, vocal variety, all just sort of marginal gains, nuances, which can add up to, you know, to be a much more impressive communicator.
Yeah, I think those marginal gains are very important. And I joined Toastmasters for almost a similar reason as you did. And I think it's a humbling experience because you realize, like you said, there are so many people who are so much better than yourself. And it's a growing experience, no doubt.
Yeah, interesting point there, though, Marcus. One of the things I've learned over recent time is not to compare myself to anybody else, because you end up with this, you know, this compare and despair where you'll always find someone that's much, much better than you are. So what I tend to do is work on comparing myself as I am now to how good I intend to be in the future, if you like, the Nigel Smith version 2. And that takes a whole lot of stress and pressure off my shoulders, because the one great thing about Toastmasters, as you'll probably support as well, is it's a really good, safe, supportive environment for self-development, where you're surrounded by a bunch of like-minded people that are actually there to help. There's no competition or no hidden agendas or those type of things. It really is a real great cocktail and hotbed of development and growth.
That cocktail and hotbed of development and growth. And I like these quotes. So as a project manager with Site Tracker, with the company Site Tracker, which you work with, what are your main responsibilities involved?
Well, they're the key ones of any project manager, essentially, Marcus. It's that holy trinity, or that iron triangle of scope, cost, and time. But I also add into there as well risk management, quality, and communication. And communication for me is probably the most important one. I would suggest that upwards of 85% of what I do as a project manager is all about communication, or over communication, which again dovetails very neatly where the Toastmasters story comes in. I think communication and leadership are two of the fundamental human skills that we have, and there's so much to learn about them. And so what I learn at Toastmasters, it creates a very virtuous circle. So the better Toastmaster I become, the better coach and project manager I become, and the better coach and project manager I become, better Toastmaster I become. So it's a really nice triad of things that I've got engaged in right now.
The yin and yang. That's nice. I like that. Swinging, like a pendulum.
Absolutely. Well, the seed of one is in the other. Excellent.
Right. Yeah. The seed of I like that. So you've been exceptionally active within PMI UK chapter, Project Management Institute's UK chapter, such as, you've been a board director, organizing webinars, mentoring, and whatnot. Can you tell us a bit about some of those PMI activities you've been involved in, and how being a Toastmasters has really helped leverage those PMI positions, I guess?
Okay, well, first and foremost, the one reason I stepped into the volunteering of the UK chapter was once I'd got my PMP, which I felt was incredibly rigorous, and I felt like once I'd got it, I'd really earned it. I wasn't going to let it go, because being a certification, of course, you've got to keep it alive with the PDU cycle over 3 years. So initially I went into it to collect all the PDUs that are needed. But as I started getting into the inner workings of the chapter, I started to volunteer for things like, judging project awards. It sort of opened the door to me actually to mentoring and coaching. So now I'm also mentoring the PMI UK chapter for upcoming and established PMs to improve their situation and their aspirations moving forward. And certainly the big catalyst, I would say, Marcus, happened around about a year ago, just at the onset of the COVID pandemic, where, of course, we all went online, and we're all zoomed out by the end of March last year. I was fortunate enough to join the digital events team at PMI UK. Now, prior to that, of course, all the events were hosted regionally in classrooms, in theatres, in corporate venues. And I used to organise and run a few of those in the Midlands area in the UK. But again, we switched to online and developed webinar offerings, using industry speakers and thought leaders and published authors. We got some really great A-class speakers coming in. And I learned a whole raft of skills about producing online content. And of course, at the same time, Toastmasters also went online, so it was also on Zoom. So I learned a whole new catalogue of skills and competencies, because I found that actually delivering content online is different to in person. And they're both great skill sets to have. And I say the online experience is marginally not as good as the in-person for obvious reasons, but there's still key ways that you can develop engagement, connection, and rapport through the online method. So what that tended to do for me, Marcus, because I was front and centre with the production of webinars for PMI UK, and we did about 50 over the course of the year, I would either host or actually sometimes even deliver a subject just for an hour, or even do the post Q&A with another speaker. So I got myself out there, I pushed all the boundaries and ticked all the boxes of the excuses why I couldn't do this stuff. Because there is this sort of fear that goes through you when you see that start broadcast button. It's like DEFCON 1, there is no turning back. You push it and it's like the world is sort of listening to you. So you have to overcome that. And what that really led to, Marcus, was the fact that I was out there, people in the chapter and the membership were aware of who I was, what I was doing. We were getting great feedback as a team in terms of the value that we were giving to our membership. And when it came to the board elections at the back end of last year, I decided to put myself forward because it just felt like a natural extension in order to moved me into the, the upper echelons of how the chapter's organised, for me to give a bit more back to the profession, add more value to the activities, and really set and architect some of the future for the chapter for this year and beyond. So that was the real reason for all of that. And just as a postscript to certainly the work on the digital events team, Marcus, as of March 2021, we were entered into the Digital Event Awards, and we're up against big organisations like Samsung and other big corporates. And we went for the best webinar series. And although we didn't win it, we actually got a highly commended status, which is almost like second place. And from a complete voluntary organisation, which is what the chapter is, in delivering exceptional quality consistently week in, week out, we thought was a great testament to all the input and effort that was put in to that series. And as a volunteer team, we grew from about 5 to 20 in the space of a year, and everyone loves it and they're learning really great skills. So it is a bit like the present that keeps giving in that respect. That volunteering for the chapter is a little bit like Toastmasters again, with that synergy, in that it is possible to get more out than you put in, which I know from a physics point of view is not possible at all, but it does give back in great quantity.
That's fantastic. Actually, I'm very curious because you joined PMI, because when I looked at a map, there was a map of PMI/Prince2 around the world. Turns out Prince2 was actually far more popular in the UK, just because it emanated from there, it grew from there. And it's curious why you joined PMI as opposed to Prince2.
So I'm actually Prince2 certified as well.
Oh, okay. Oh.
It was the first project management certification I got, and for the very reason you mentioned, Marcus, it's pretty UK centric, and I think it originated from the UK Government Office of Commerce. So it's really ingrained into the institution here, and that's fine for UK based projects. But at the time I was working for the Ford Motor Company, which of course are very global, and PMI of course have got a massive footprint worldwide, whereas you've got other associations like the APM of course, which are big in the UK and Europe as well. But because Ford were going the PMI route, that's how I managed to get involved in that. And I can actually say over the years since 2007, I've had some great collaborations with other chapters across the globe for shared learning, and it's been a really great experience in doing that. But that's the reason I went the PMI route.
Oh, that's fantastic. So if someone's relatively new to Toastmasters, what's your recommendation on the steps that they can build to develop public speaking skills?
I think first and foremost, they've got to have a desire and a goal to achieve. I've got a book on my bookshelf, Marcus, and it's called "And Death Came Third." And most people would rather die than do public speaking. And the one that came second, by the way, was networking, which again are great communication skills. And I think I don't actually think that people are afraid of public speaking or presenting. I think it's a fear of failure. So at its root level, I would say it's all about confidence. And you will know from your Toastmasters experience, Marcus, all clubs get members and guests across a broad range of speaking abilities. And, it's a very supportive environment, and people that really want to help to develop what they need to do will find the support they need within that club. But my key thing to anyone interested in Toastmasters would be, first and foremost, just go to a few clubs as a guest and just see how the format works. When I first came across the Toastmasters format, I thought it was a little bit old-fashioned and a bit stuffy, but actually the rigor, particularly around the timing and the organisation and the planning, you need it to finish, to get your 2-hour session on time. And timing for speeches is really, really important. So don't let those sort of things put you off, because actually the experience of a Toastmasters club is pretty much replicated across the 17,000 or so across the globe. So I would encourage, and it's quite easy in the Zoom age, of course, to visit clubs all over the world. I would encourage people to do that. And if they still have that burning desire after experiencing what it's like as a guest, then to sign up at a club, possibly one that's local. So for example, when we do get back to in-person or hybrid, there's a chance to go along and meet people, because again, whilst developing online communication skills is great, in person is just as important as well. And the first thing I did when I joined, or in fact, even when I was a guest, Marcus, at Boring Speakers, which is my local club, is that I decided that every single Toastmasters meeting I went to, I would not be passive. And what I meant by that is I would do a speaking role, or I would do a role in the meeting, but I would do something. And consistently for 2.5 years, I've done that, because I think if you get into the habit of just watching, of course you can learn by osmosis because you learn from everybody else, but it's like most things in life, you learn more by doing, and it's by making those mistakes that you get those marginal gains to get all of your improvement. You know, I can still remember the first time I stood up to my very first prepared speech. I was gripping the chair saying, "Don't call my name, don't call my name." I could feel my heart starting to beat a bit faster and a bead of sweat starting to come down. And when they call my name, and of course you make the way to the front, you know, and everyone's clapping. And I took an absolute age, considering that the table I sat at was right at the front. And I stood there and I was sort of like cowering like this, and I wasn't looking up very much, and I didn't smile. And what I've really learned is that even if you don't feel confident, you have to look it. You know, it goes back to that imposter syndrome bit a little bit. You've got to stand up straight. You've got to have your head there. You've got to make that eye contact. You've got to smile. It gives everyone so much confidence, and then you become a mirror to your audience. And those were some of the key things I learned, even before I opened my mouth to make a speech. But that took a series of weeks, if not months, to get to that point. But had I not gone to Toastmasters, I would have been that same crunched up, closed body language person who thought he was good enough at presentation and speaking, when frankly, I wasn't. So long story, but get involved, do something and push yourself. Get yourself a mentor, you know, as soon as you're in, as soon as you sign up as a member. Choose and select your pathway. That there's great people in the club that will help you along whichever path supports your need. And then the other key thing I've learned to do is to schedule speeches, even if you don't really know what it's going to turn out like, and just plan it forward. You don't have to have it all worked out. Plan a speech for a month's time, and as that time goes by, the how you will do it will come to you. You've got your mentor to lean on, of course, but you know, you don't have to be great. You know, you don't have to be great to get going, but you have to get going to be great, really. And it's just about the doing part. Just immerse yourself in it. And as you do that, and it's certainly on my journey, I absolutely loved it. And that's what got me involved in wanting to take an active role from a more leadership position on the committee of the club, do roles in the meeting, some fundamental skills you can learn about running workshops and stuff just by being a Toastmaster, for example. It's absolutely fantastic. And then I got involved in contests, and that was an absolute catalyst that took my development to the next level, because what you're doing then, whilst at a club level, you've got your 20 or 30 colleagues who are your club members. When you start going to contests, you start spreading out and out, and you're surrounded by hundreds of really talented people who are still there to help and support you, and you make some fantastic connections. So network, again, it's really, really good. And then you get involved, like I am tomorrow, in the area contest here in the UK. And again, you get to use your skills in a more practical way to help the club and the area, and also the contestants themselves. So it's like I said before, it is the gift that keeps giving. It really is a virtuous circle of improvement and learning.
Well, fantastic. Yes, I know what you mean by when you begin. When I first started doing public speaking, and I remember getting up to that stage, I was shaking. I lost my words. I would start off by saying, first of all, second of all, first of all, fifth of all. I was a mess. But looking back, that was many years ago, and it takes time. It takes time, like you said, to prepare, to watch, to listen, to practice. And after a while, it just seems like it comes natural to you. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, it's like anything. Is it the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of practice that gets you good at anything? I think it is a learned and developed skill, Marcus. I mean, I know probably my first half a dozen speeches, I actually started with a script, and I was so wooden with it, because I actually used a lectern as well. So that lectern was my defense mechanism. I'm safe behind this. I then moved on to cards. And what I was finding was the cards were more of a comfort than an aid, because I wasn't using them. But actually, if someone said to me, put those cards down on the table, I probably would have fallen apart. You know, it's like a comfort that I needed, even though I wasn't referring to them. And then more naturally, you start to work out your structure of what you're going to do, just one or two keywords at these sections, and then you're away. Because what I've also learned, aside from the fact it's the power of the story that's really important in communicating, you know, at the end of the day, it's about being spontaneous and in the moment, and almost sort of semi-impromptu, the way you structure your speech, as long as you contain all those key headlines. And I think that then builds in positive pressure, because the one thing I hadn't mentioned at the time for my first speech, where I was gripping the chair and sweating and palpitating a bit, I'd got sort of the classic butterflies in my stomach all churning around, making me feel all a bit queasy. And what I've managed to do with that over time is turn that to a positive. So it almost give me like an adrenaline boost to say, I've got this, and this start's going to be really great. Because I guess, as you will have found as well, Marcus, the first things you say when you start your speech, it tests whether or not you've got the attention engagement of your audience. And having a great start really draws people in, you know. And if you can master that pause, you know, which is really sometimes hard to do, because people want to fill that silence, draw people in, how you carry on, then you take them all on that journey. So it's about, from my perspective, taking that sort of semi-negative, in terms of making me feel a bit sort of pressurized and stressed about it, into building it into improving my performance in the way that I start.
Yeah, I think definitely Toastmasters is definitely high on my itemized list of things to do, and I'm doing it now, definitely. But in regards to stage fright, I was just going to say that is what they call it, stage fright. Even the most professional actors get stage fright. So no matter how long you've been in Toastmasters, I was telling someone the other day that I was doing a speech at Toastmasters, and my forehead was sweating, and the top of my glasses were fogging, and here I was doing a speech that of course I've done speeches for years, and I thought, this is stage fright. Anyhow, after telling my co-friends that this happened, they said, Marcus, we didn't even see it. We didn't see that was the case, because you learn, even if you have stage fright, how to maybe suppress it, not to show it. Like you said, I know you are, but you don't look it, so to speak. But of course, I didn't look it. I was sweating, but I didn't look it, because I knew how to control it over. So that's something that.
That's really, really great advice.
So anyway, in regards to speech competitions, which you were talking about, let's talk about getting involved in speech competitions in the club. What's their purpose? You mentioned a bit about that. What's their importance, or what are the different types of speeches that are involved? Speech competitions, that is. Okay,
well, certainly in the UK, it may differ from other countries around the world, but there's typically 4 types of speech contests that you can get involved with. 2 of each are run twice a year, so that you don't have it all at once. But typically there's something called table topics, which I think fundamentally is the mainstay of being an excellent Toastmaster, and certainly an area that I need to invest more time and get better at, because that is impromptu speaking. And on impromptu speaking, when you're put on the spot and you've got to think on your feet, structure something for 1 or 2 minutes to give that verbal speech back. And you can draw so many parallels, Marcus, to the work environment, where perhaps back in the day, or even now on Zoom, you might get a phone call to say, oh, Nigel, can you just give an update on this particular project, or can you speak about this subject? You're up in 10 minutes, or you're up now. It's like, oh, OMG. And what table topics really teaches you is a great skill, is to think on your feet, structure what you're going to say. The rule of 3 is fantastic in Toastmasters. It's really memorable for those that are listening. You start off, you have your content, and then you finish off with a really great call to action, which really leaves that message behind. So that for me is one of the contests. I say between 1 and 2 minutes. And again, going back to the timing I mentioned earlier, for all of these things, if you're under time or over time, you do get disqualified. So it's a really good discipline to be at one with time, not just in table topics, but across the rest of the speeches. The other speeches that you can go in for is one called the humorous speech, which is 5 to 7 minutes. And typically it's a story, often that the personal ones are the best, but you try to add elements of humor in there, because once you get good humor and something lands really well, you've brought your audience in, you've captivated them, they'll hang on your next few words. And that's a real specialist skill as well, because of course we all know, don't we, that humor can sometimes not land. But what I've learnt, Marcus, is if you make it about yourself, a little bit self-deprecating, everyone can laugh with you, at you, if that sort of makes sense. But you have to be a little bit careful about how you do it with reference to others and stuff. But certainly for me personally, that's been the contest I've had the greatest success. So last year I managed to get a 3rd place in the division finals. And this year for 2021, I've actually gone to the district finals, which happen in about another 4 weeks' time. So I'm really looking forward to that. And all the good things you mentioned about all the nerves and everything just before we start, I'm sure I'm going to get those, as indeed does every single Toastmaster, irrespective of how good they are. I think everybody does feel that. Moving on, the other 2 contests. The other one is an evaluation contest. Now, when I first joined Toastmasters, I thought it was all about speaking and talking, but do you know what? There's a massive element about active listening. And active listening is not just about the art of listening, but it's also about the ability to give great feedback. And Toastmasters does this wonderfully in a very, very positive way. So typically what would happen is you'd have a target speech, and then as an evaluator, you'd have 2 to 3 minutes to give your structured evaluation back to the speaker, typically using what we call in the UK a sandwich technique, which is something you liked, something that could be improved, and then something that you really liked. Again, rule of 3 in play. There are variations on this, of course. You could go for structure, content, and delivery, or even what I saw, what I heard, and how I felt. Are really good structures around evaluation. But I think evaluation is a very, very close second to table topics in terms of the value of skills learned to be a Toastmaster, because it's not just about speaking. I think listening is an incredibly underrated skill. None of this stuff, by the way, Marcus, certainly in the UK, they do not teach you in schools very effectively, I don't think. But having said all of that, the 4th and probably the most prestigious contest is the International Speech Contest, because this is the one where you can go all the way through to the World Championship of Public Speaking. Now, I think you've probably got to win about, I don't know, just shy of a dozen qualifying contests to get there. But fundamentally, again, it goes from club to area, division, district, and then I think there's some sub-regional before you get to the world levels. But again, it's a 5 to 7 minute speech. Typically from the ones that I've seen, personal stories really resonate the best, get all the right structures in place. What Toastmasters has really well is really clear judging criteria. So what the judges are looking for in terms of vocal variety or body language, or how the message came across and how impactful it was. But that international speech is the pinnacle of the contests for Toastmasters International. There's one world champion per year, and even in the Zoom age, we still have that contest running, and we're heavily into contest season right now. And I believe it'll be coming up later in the year. I know our district finals have been held in May. But as I mentioned to you before, the real catalyst for me was being involved in contests, because it took my learning and development to the next level. And I was able to mix with other Toastmasters from other clubs and other areas. And it really does take you further along your journey.
Yeah, I know there's definitely, like you said, there's this catalog of improvement over time. And I think those speech competitions definitely help. There's no doubt about that. Very impactful indeed. So you've been involved with Agile coaching, something that's near and dear to your heart. How, as a coach, do you help organizations identify their vision and coach them toward a future state where those benefits are realized?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I have to say, when we started this a few moments ago, I talked about being an accidental project manager. I started life in the automotive industry, Mark, because it was very much command and control style project management, very old-fashioned, seemed to work, but wasn't always that effective.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, with the onset of the dot-com boom and the rising fame of Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these people started to embrace, particularly in the software industry, the more agile techniques. It seemed to me that you've got two important aspects for project delivery. One is the task itself, but one is also the softer, more relational part, the soft skills, if you will. And I learned the hard way that command and control doesn't work. And so I was looking for something to fill that void, to help me with my interpersonal skills and to relate to people much better. So I went off and became certified as a coach, performance coach, and that really gave me that raft of soft skills and competence that I needed. And again, things like active listening, things like communication, goes back into that triad with Toastmasters about how effective that can be. Really joined it all together. So project management, coaching, and Toastmasters for communication, I think in my parlor at least, equals the new agile project manager in that sense, because the agile project manager is not about, as I say, command and control. It's more about the servant leader style. And I often refer to my role as being the road sweeper, that clears the freeway, of all obstacles, distractions, cones, accidents, wherever it may be. And then the project team is following through and they've got a clear sight. There's nothing going to get in the way. There's nothing that's going to take them off course. So from that perspective, just getting back to your question, of course, from a coaching angle, working with clients, it really does go back to Stephen Covey and his 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit number 2, rather, begin with the end in mind. What is it that is the goal in mind? What is that future state that needs to be realized? Because if you're not specific about where you want to get, it's a little bit like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, really. If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. So really be specific about what that future state is, then work with them to identify, with them providing the suggestions about what that path can be, and then bringing it down from the big vision into small, manageable, tangible steps, which is going to move them closer and closer to the destined outcomes that they want. But it does start with the client, it does start with their vision, and really fundamentally it starts with what they can do about the situation.
Manageable, tangible steps. I like that. Speaking about manageable, tangible steps, if anyone in the audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Well, 2 easy ways, really, Marcus. One is through LinkedIn. You'll find me under there. I'm probably listed as Nigel Smith, PMP. Or if you want to more directly get in contact with me, you can do so via the PMI UK chapter. And my email address is nigel.smith@pmi.org.uk. That's nigel.smith@pmi.org.uk. I'll be really happy to have any follow-up conversations or answer any questions that people may have about what we've talked about today. Marcus, happy to do that.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, Nigel. I think you've eloquently articulated PMI and the same with Toastmasters, and you've been able to join them both together, which I think is a very adequate skill. And obviously, like I said in the beginning, you're a quintessential example of someone who's been able to combine those two very, very well. So thank you for being a guest, Nigel. It's been absolutely splendid.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
Okay, have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.